I would like to call this finance meeting of District 65 to order at 7:12 p.m. Can we have a roll call? Here. 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 Our first action is regarding the minutes of the August 14th meeting to be approved as, I'll read it. The Finance Committee recommends that the minutes of the August 15th, 2017 Board Finance Committee meeting be approved as presented. Can I have a second?
Second.
Chad? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So moved. Our first and only discussion item tonight, unless there's, did it, Paul, or was there anything you wanted to say?
I have one thing to say, but can I?
Why don't you go ahead and say
I will, and it.
before we start the...
I just wanted to take a moment and remember that today is September 11th, and 16 years ago, many people lost their lives, and many wonderful first responders did everything in their power to try to save lives, and it's always worth recognizing that and remembering that as we move forward in all the work that we do and the work that we do to educate young people and civil society. So just wanted to pay attention to that today.
Thank you. Thank you. So then we'll move to our discussion item, which is the reconciliation between FY18, tentative budget, and our final budgets. And I guess I'll turn it over to Kathy.
Thank you. And I just want to remind the committee that the full presentation of the tentative budget was done last month. Since then, the presentation is posted online. Raphael and I, we did 3 community budget presentations last week. And I believe that presentation is also posted online. And today we just want to go over changes to the tentative budget, which are summarized in 2 tables. We do not have a PowerPoint, so I would like to bring your attention to Table 1, which has these changes by object. There's also Table 2, which has the changes by fund, but since we always present our revenues and expenditures by category, which we call object, let me concentrate on Table number 1. So overall revenues decreased by approximately $176,000, and what contributed to that was primarily 2 things. Actually, one thing which decreased significantly, it was corporate personal property replacement tax. The state slashed the projection for FY18 by 24%. The explanation that we received included weak domestic profits, bigger than projected business refunds, and some statutory transfers from CPPRT funds. And we're not sure if there were additional errors that they were made. If you remember from our presentations from prior years, there were errors that they discovered in FY14 and 15, and they were paying that back. But overall, we are losing over $500,000. And that adjustment is actually reflected in long-term projections. We cannot justify having these higher numbers based on these weaker numbers. So that is reflected in the financial projection update. There were some small adjustments to other mainly to local grants, and a large adjustment to state revenues, which is state pre-K grant, which was not reflected in the tentative budget. And I also, since we're talking about state, just want to point out that we got some resolution to state revenues. After 3 years of negotiations, we finally got some answers, and we like the answers because previously we were projecting a 6.7 million loss. It looks right now that our revenues will be flat due to hold harmless provision. No school district's revenues will go down. At least that's what they say. I mean, we don't know if they're going to have money to pay, and for that reason, we are being very conservative with prior year revenues. There are still 2 unpaid payments from last fiscal year. We are including only 1. Because again, when I send email to this, they basically, told me straight that there will not be money possibly to pay to. So we only have 1. We haven't changed that assumption. There's only 1 payment. But overall, I think it's a good news. If you follow the news, there's a compromise in the bill, Senate Bill 1947, affecting CPS block grants are out. There's 75 million of private scholarships included in the bill. There's also provision about the referendum, which likely does not affect us, because our adequacy target is at 100. We are at tier 3, not tier 4. So again, that law does not affect us. So going back to the table, there's a small adjustment to federal funds of approximately $3,000. This is just adjustment based on what money came in. On the expenditure side, overall expenditures went down, decreased by approximately $105,000. Salaries were adjusted up due to additional positions. We had to add 1 special education teacher due to student needs, 2 special education TAs, again due to student needs. There were also funds added to pre-K salaries. In addition to these revenues, we also added expenditures. And there were also some adjustments between the tentative budget, the final budget. When we receive recommendation forms, we adjust a lot of salaries, a lot of positions are vacant during the budget building process, and then when we get the recommendation forms, the actual cost is adjusted in the budget. So all of this adds to $283,000. Good news on the benefits. Because pension cost shift was not included in the final Senate Bill 1947, that was reduced from the budget, but not in projections. We still including the cost in projections, but the cost next year will start, instead of 1%, will start with 0.5%. So we are able to delay that cost. Also, phenomenal news on what's called TRS Federal. So it really has nothing to do, well, it has a lot to do with federal grants, but it's something that we pay to the state government on every dollar of federal grant salaries. We've been paying over 40% really penalty. They call it pension, but it has nothing to do with a pension. It's just administrative cost. So that cost went down from 44% to 10%. That saved us close to $250,000, and again, that change is reflected in projections. There are some other adjustments to purchase services and supplies. This is all related to grants. So if we had grant carryover amounts, basically unspent funding from prior year, those amounts were added to the budgets. And because some things went down, some things went up, if you look at the projections in the last column, we are still in the black, we are still managing to have some of the reserves in fiscal year 25. Without the changes to TRS Federal and the pension cost shift, we probably wouldn't have that balanced budget situation, but we do. So overall change...
That's assuming that we stay true, which we will,
Correct.
to the board's unanimous proclamation of holding the referendum funds.
And assuming we can control our expenses. Right. So the overall change to the bottom line is not a big one. It's only $70,000. Again, these will be again updated again in February when we get the new CPI and some of the assumptions that we use will change. These will be updated again. So that's all I have.
Not to throw a monkey wrench in all our conversation, but there's something that still makes me nervous, and I thought I would share it with you, is the provision of Senate Bill 1947 indicated that there's a clause of inseverability in the legislation. What in essence it says is that if someone goes out and files a lawsuit against a provision of the bill, and the court nullify one of the provisions of the bill, everything has to be renegotiated. The whole bill will be voided. So it makes me nervous because there are conversations about a different constituency who felt, for example, as it relates to the $75 million tax credit for private schools. There are conversations about folks trying to file litigation to nullify that because we believe that public funds should not be used to subsidize private education. So I just want us to keep that in the back as a possibility of something we may have to contend with down the road. I hope not, because it took 3 years for this deal to be done.
Just to add to it, so Raphael and I both were at the EdRed meeting last Friday where there was a very deep, detailed discussion around 1947 and the aspects of it. And something else that struck me was, as part of this bill, $350 million additional funds are going to be put into the system. Well, they are not guaranteed if they haven't found the money. That $350 million will go to districts based on need. We would likely see none of that additional money. But it was interesting that the $75 million in tax credits is guaranteed, while the $350 million is not guaranteed. It's just based on the state of the system. So, obviously a bill was negotiated after this long, long time and compromises had to be made, but there's some lack of equity in some of the constructs. So we have to stay very, very ardent around looking to make sure that $350 million actually gets allocated. It's likely the 75 could get taken out of that, and then some other sources of income could get taken out of that before that money is put into education. And net, we are still 50th in the nation for support of education. So it hasn't, even the $350 million doesn't make a dent in our state status of how Illinois funds education.
If I can just explain a little bit why one is guaranteed, the other one is not. The $75 million is actually a tax credit. It's not actual appropriation that's coming from the state. So the Illinois Department of Revenue will give credit to entities that meet the requirement for those scholarships. So in essence, they're not sending money out, they're just giving credit against taxes that will be owed by this entity.
And again, to underscore what you said earlier, if in the inseverability clause, if somebody sues on the $75 million and the court says that's not constitutional, then the whole thing's thrown out and we start again.
Yeah. So.
Can I also mention, at the hearings last week, the meetings, there were less hearings and more discussion, and Rebecca was there at one of the evening meetings. They were rich in conversation, and the several citizens who did show up came forward and really articulated well their concerns about the longer-term structural deficit that is still embedded in our budgeting over the years. We were able to reduce some of those costs this past year with savings in negotiations and the generous support from the referendum, but we still, 8 years down the line, have issues that we're going to have to address. Really what the citizens were saying to us was immediately around cost structures, around pay, around benefits, and I think we all found it very fruitful to hear and several people had done their own analysis with their own numbers to bring to the table, and I think it's a worthwhile set of comments that will help us as we plan not only to execute this budget, but to think about the next couple budgets and how we actually find efficiencies and where we come back to the board with cost reductions.
Is that all for this discussion point? Are there questions? Comments? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you both.
Welcome, and I just want to say that the budget hearing will be at the next board meeting. And the budget adoption.
Okay.
And we plan to, once we're done, publish the budget at a glance and the budget book and make sure that that's available to citizens and, you know, across our two towns. Yeah.
Great. And a thanks to the team for doing, I mean, we've done budget, I don't know, hearings is a strange word too, but meetings, but it does sound like this one included more people, not tens of thousands that get out to talk about the budget, you know, which I can understand, but more dialogue around it versus just a show and tell. So I think that's something that we're trying to get better at, so thank you for that. Okay, well, we don't have any other items on the agenda unless anyone has something they'd like to say. Our next meeting is October 9th, so with no further business for the Finance Committee, I adjourn this meeting at 7:28 p.m. You don't have to do work.